Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Trish Angelina spent 10 years as the neglected wife of Harry Claudio, a tech mogul who saw her as nothing more than a background figure to his extravagant life. His affair with Petty Nia, a glamorous image consultant, only deepened Trish's pain. But when Harry dismissed her anniversary surprise with a cruel, careless comment, Trish finally walked away. In a small New England town, Trish rediscovered her true self, becoming a celebrated artist. Her rise to success culminated in her artwork being showcased at the Starlight Gala, an event Harry organized. When he saw Trish again, she was no longer the quiet, unseen wife. She had transformed into a powerful, confident woman who had reclaimed her life and her worth. This is the story of Trish's revenge, rebirth, and ultimate triumph. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. The soft clink of ice against glass echoed in the stillness of Harry Claudio's penthouse on the prestigious Upper East Side. It was a sound Trish Angelina had come to dread, an audible reminder of her degradation. Another lonely Tuesday evening, another night spent with her husband, the man whose name was synonymous with tech mogul success and cold ambition. He treated her like an afterthought, a fixture he'd long forgotten. Trish sat on the cream-colored sofa, a high-end piece from Petty Nia, one that cost more than the car her parents had once owned. She pretended to read, but the words on the page blurred into meaningless ink. Her attention was fully captured by him, the tightness in his jaw as he scrolled through his phone, a faint, cruel smile tugging at the corners of his lips. She knew who he was texting. Petty Nia. That name, just the thought of it, tasted bitter, even unspoken. Petty was everything Trish wasn't. Vibrant, attention-grabbing, with a figure sculpted by trainers and an impeccable diet. She was an image consultant, a fancy title that implied nothing more than attending exclusive events and being photographed by Harry's side. Their affair was no secret. Harry paraded Petty everywhere, from charity galas to product launches, even at a family Christmas dinner where Trish's mother had to pretend not to see Petty's possessive hand resting on Harry's back. "Do you need something?" Harry's voice sliced through the quiet. He didn't even bother to look up from his phone. Trish's heart tightened. It was the tone of a man irritated by a bothersome fly. She lowered her book. "I was just wondering if you'd given any thought to the Children's Hospital fundraiser. We need to finalize the corporate sponsors by Friday." Finally, he glanced up, but the look in his eyes was pure disinterest, a bored, indifferent expression that said, "You and your little projects." He waved her off. "Send the list to Marie, she'll handle it." Trish's insides turned cold, but it wasn't rage anymore. That had burned out long ago. What remained was resignation. She had once been Trish Angelina, an art history graduate with bright eyes and a passion for restoration. When she met Harry, he had swept her off her feet with his charm, the whirlwind of his confidence. He had claimed to love her quiet demeanor, calling it the perfect antidote to his chaotic life. 10 years of marriage had revealed the truth. Harry hadn't loved her calm nature, he had loved her silence. He adored the fact that she didn't challenge him, that she managed their home with quiet efficiency, and that she was a pretty but unremarkable backdrop to his extravagant life. Over the years, she had slowly faded into the background, like a watercolor left out in the rain. Her clothes were tasteful but dull, chosen for their discretion. Her hair, always in a neat bun, was practical, not styled. She hadn't purchased a new tube of lipstick in 3 years. What was the point? The only person she wanted to notice her didn't even look. The turning point had come 6 months earlier, on their 10th anniversary. Trish had gone all out, planning a surprise evening with a private chef, her favorite flowers, and the blue dress Harry had once said made her eyes sparkle like the ocean. But when he came home, it was late, and he reeked of Petty's signature perfume, a heavy gardenia scent that made Trish's stomach twist. He didn't notice the flowers, the chef, or the dress. He simply walked past her into the bedroom, pulling off his tie. "Long day," he muttered, offering no apology, only a statement of fact. "I'm exhausted," she whispered. "I think I'll turn in early." "It's just another day, Trish," he grunted, not bothering to turn around. "We've been married for 10 years. What's the big deal?" His words stung. When he finally turned to face her, his eyes were cold, dismissive. "Don't be so needy. It's unattractive. The word hit her like a slap. Needy. The woman who asked for nothing. The woman who had silently swallowed his infidelities. The woman who had kept their lives running in the shadows while he took all the spotlight. That night, the last sliver of hope she'd been clinging to, her belief that the man she once knew still existed inside, died. Watching him text Petty in the home she had so meticulously cared for, the final thread of her patience snapped. She stood up abruptly, the sudden movement startling him. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days," she said, her voice calm, even. Harry barely looked up. "Fine," he muttered, already absorbed in his phone again. "Sheets in the guest room are clean." Without hesitation, Trish walked into their massive bedroom, her closet a space the size of a small boutique. On one side hung Harry's designer suits and shirts. On the other, her collection of beige and gray. She packed a small suitcase, not with the muted clothes of her current life, but with remnants of the woman she used to be. A pair of worn-out jeans, a paint-stained t-shirt, her old art supplies, her passport, and the small tarnished silver locket her grandmother had given her. As she walked through the living room, Harry remained on the sofa, illuminated by the blue light of his phone. He didn't look up. He didn't say goodbye, the final goodbye. She closed the heavy oak door of their penthouse. The soft click, a final punctuation mark in the story of her life with him. The doorman, Jorge, tipped his cap. "Have a good night, Mrs. Claudio." "You too, Jorge," she said, her first genuine smile in months. Outside, the air was crisp and cool. Trish didn't go to her sister's place. Instead, she walked to the nearest ATM, withdrew all her savings, and took a cab. "Penn Station," she told the driver, her voice clear, strong. As the taxi drove away, she took one last look at the towering building where she had lost herself. Harry wouldn't even notice she was gone, not until his shirts weren't perfectly pressed or he ran out of his favorite coffee. By then, it would be too late. She wasn't Mrs. Claudio anymore. She was simply Trish, and for the first time in years, that was enough. The ghost was leaving the building, and she wasn't looking back. The event chair was listed as Harry Claudio, and on his arm, Starlight Galan, the accompanying photo, smiling brightly, was Petty Nia, now listed as Petty Claudio. They had married. A younger Trish would have felt a pang of pain, a bitter twist of jealousy. But looking at the photo now, she felt nothing, a strange clinical detachment. They looked like two strangers in a photograph, frozen in a world that had nothing to do with her anymore. Ben pointed to the list of major sponsors. "Look," he said, his finger tapping the page. "The Claudio Foundation is the title sponsor, of course, but look at the corporate art partner." Trish's eyes followed his finger, and there in elegant script was the name of the company commissioned to provide the central art installation for the gala, Angelina Studios. Her studio, the Starlight Gala, the pinnacle of the world she had fled, and they wanted her, or rather her work, as their centerpiece. The irony was so rich, so potent, it was almost comical. Ben was corporate art partner looking at her, waiting for a reaction. He didn't know her history. To him, this was just a massive professional opportunity. A slow smile spread across Trish's face. It was a real, confident, genuine smile. The chrysalis hadn't just broken. It had shattered, revealing something stronger and more beautiful than she ever could have imagined. "Ben," she said, her voice calm and clear, "call them. Tell them we accept and book me a ticket. It's time for me to pay a visit." The Starlight Gala. The ballroom of the Ritz Hotel was a galaxy of manufactured stars. Crystals dripped from chandeliers like frozen rain, casting fragmented light over a sea of couture gowns and bespoke tuxedos. The air buzzed with the rarefied murmur of old and new money. A symphony of champagne glasses, discreet laughter, and the ceaseless networking of Thesidy's elite. This was the Starlight Gala, Harry Claudios's annual monumento, his own philanthropy and power. At the center of the room, roped off by velvet cords, stood the night's central art piece. It was a sculpture, but that word felt too small, too static. It was echoes of a Renaissance and installation, a living work of art titled Echoes of a Renaissance. 3 enormous translucent panels, each over 10 ft tall, were arranged in a soft curve. Embedded in the polished resin were the ghosts of industrial decay. Rusted gears that seemed to float in the air, delicate filigrees of verdigris copper, and fragments of shattered iridescent glass. Yet woven through this metallic skeleton were streaks of pure brilliant color, swaths of sapphire blue, emerald green, and a defiant burning crimson. A Eleanor Angelina hidden lights pulsed from within, causing the colors to shift and glow, making the rusted metal seem to breathe. It was breathtaking, a powerful statement about the beauty that could be forged from ruin. The artist, according to the program, was a rising star named Eleanor Angelina, a name that meant nothing to Harry Claudio. He had barely glanced at the proposal, delegating Thartsy stuff to the event committee. His focus was on the real prize, the multi-million-dollar donations they would extract from the city's wealthiest patrons before the night was over. He stood near the entrance, a king surveying his court. By his side, Petty Claudio glittered in a silver gown that clung to her like a second skin. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an intricate updo that must have taken hours, and the diamond collar at her throat, Harry's latest "I love you," was dazzling. She was the perfect accessory. The beautiful, polished wife of a billionaire. "Darling, you've outdone yourself," she cooed, squeezing his arm. "Is everyone here?" "Of course they are," Harry said, his eyes scanning the crowd, calculating net worths. "It's the only entrance that matters." The only entrance that matters. He was in his element, powerful, admired, and in control. The ghost of his first wife, the quiet, mousy woman whose name he hadn't spoken in 5 years, was a distant, faded memory. He had heard she'd moved to some dreary, insignificant place. He'd paid her a paltry sum as stipulated in their prenuptial agreement and had let his lawyers handle the divorce. It was a clean, efficient amputation of a part of his life that no longer served him. It was then that she walked in. He didn't notice her at first. His attention was captured by the collective ripple that ran through the room, the subtle turning of heads, the sudden pause in conversations. It was the kind of entrance that usually heralded the arrival of a movie star or foreign royalty. This woman was different. His eyes followed the crowd's gaze to the grand archway. The woman who stood there was not a movie star. He would have known her. This woman was different. She wore a simple floor-length silk dress in emerald green. It was a bold, striking color, but the cut was exquisitely discreet. It didn't cling or glitter, it flowed. Her hair was a sharp, dark bob that gleamed under the chandeliers, framing a face that was at once elegant and captivating. High cheekbones, a strong jawline, and eyes that seemed to possess a quiet, knowing power. A single magnificent piece of jewelry, a hand-crafted silver pendant that echoed the sculpture in the center of the room, rested at her collarbone. She was not conventionally beautiful. She was not conventionally beautiful like Petty. She was something more compelling. She was art. "Who is that?" Petty whispered, a rare note of insecurity in her voice. She felt a primal feminine threat. This woman was not playing the same game she was. She operated on a completely different plane. Harry grunted, his eyes narrowed. "I don't know. Probably some artist. The one who did the sculpture, I imagine." He dismissed her with the same casual arrogance he applied to anyone he deemed unimportant. She was staff, essentially. The woman began to move through the room. She didn't work the crowd or seek anyone out. She simply walked, her posture perfect, her gaze forward, a small, serene smile on her lips. People parted for her, their eyes following her. She was heading towards the sculpture. Her path would take her directly past Harry and Petty. As she drew closer, Harry got a better look at her face. There was something, a flash of something familiar in the curve of her smile and the shape of her eyes. It was like hearing a half-forgotten melody, a ghost of a memory he couldn't place. He dismissed it. A trick of the light. She was only a few feet away now. The event photographer, sensing the moment, raised his camera. The gala chair, his beautiful wife, and the mysterious artist. A perfect shot. A perfect shot. Petty, always mindful of appearances, put on a brilliant smile. Harry adopted a look of magnanimous patronage. This woman, after all, was contributing to his event. The artist, Eleanor Angelina, paused as she reached them. Her cool, imperial, impersonal gaze swept over Petty's glittering dress, then Harry's perfectly tailored tuxedo. For a fraction of a second, her eyes met Harry's. And in that moment, he felt nothing, no recognition, no spark of memory. He was looking at a complete stranger. A mildly interesting stranger, but ultimately irrelevant. "A wonderful piece," Harry said, his voice booming with false sincerity. He gestured vaguely at the sculpture. "A real conversation starter, well done." It was the kind of praise one gives a caterer for a well-arranged canopy. The woman's smile didn't waver. It was polite, distant, and completely unreadable. "Thank you, Mr. Claudio," she said. Her voice was low and soft with a timbre that was somehow both honeyed and unbreakable. "I'm so glad you find it to your liking." Then she directed her gaze to Petty. "Mrs. Claudio," she said with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "That's a lovely necklace," Petty pined, touching the diamonds at her throat. "Thank you." Harry has impeccable, a lovely necklace taste. The artist's smile widened slightly, a subtle shift at the corner of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. He certainly does, she agreed softly, and then she was gone. She simply continued her serene walk to her sculpture, leaving Harry and Petty standing in her wake. The moment had passed. The photographer, disappointed, lowered his camera. Harry turned back to the crowd, already dismissing the brief interaction, but the ghost of a melody was still there, nagging at the edge of his consciousness. Angelina, Eleanor, Angelina. The name was common enough, and the voice he certainly does. There was an echo to it, a phantom resonance he couldn't place. Petty was prattling on beside him about someone's terrible shoe choice, but Harry wasn't listening. He was watching the artist. She was being greeted by the director of the city's Museum of Modern Art, a man who had snubbed Harry at a fundraiser last month. They were shaking hands, the director's face alight with genuine admiration. Trish. The name rang out again, this time more loudly. Trish, the Children's Hospital fundraiser. I'm helping to organize it. The quiet woman on the cream-colored sofa, the simple bun, the beige cardigans, the wife he had erased. His blood ran cold. He looked again at the artist who was now laughing at something the museum director had said. Her entire face was transformed by the laughter, vibrant and alive. He tried to superimpose the image of his mousy, timid first wife over this radiant, confident woman. It was impossible. They were two different people, and yet he saw it, a tiny, almost invisible scar just above her left eyebrow. From a childhood fall she had once told him about. The way she tilted her head when she was listening intently. The specific, unique shade of dark chocolate in her eyes now sparkling with life under the chandeliers. The whiskey he'd had earlier churned in his stomach. The air in the opulent ballroom suddenly felt thick, suffocating. He turned to Petty, his face ashen. "What's wrong, darling?" she asked, her smile faltering at his expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Harry's gaze was fixed on the woman across the room, the artist, the stranger, the woman he had completely ignored, the woman he had praised like a servant, the woman who was impossibly, undeniably his first wife. "I think he whispered, the full weight of his colossal mistake beginning to crash down upon him. It was too late. The encounter had happened. The dismissal was complete, and the woman he hadn't. The encounter had happened recognized was now the most obed person in the room. What did you feel at this moment? Surprise, satisfaction, or maybe a little pity for Harry? Leave your opinion in the comments. A war of egos. The recognition didn't hit Harry like a lightning bolt. It was more like the slow, sickening creep of a tide of his cold water. One moment he was Harry Claudio, master of the universe, standing at the pinnacle of his own glittering event. The next he was a man staring into an abyss of his own creation. "That's not possible," he breathed, more to himself than to Petty. "What's not possible?" Petty demanded, her voice shrill with irritation. His sudden pour was ruining the mood. "Harry, what is wrong with you?" He couldn't answer. His mind was a frantic jumble of disconnected images. The quiet, submissive woman leaving his apartment with a small suitcase and the radiant, self-possessed artist presiding over her magnificent sculpture. The two realities refused to merge. How could the drab, colorless caterpillar he had discarded have transformed into this butterfly? And not just any butterfly, but one with steel wings. He watched as the city's mayor, a man he'd been trying to get a meeting with for months, walked over to Trish, shaking her hand with genuine enthusiasm. The chairman of the board of the city's largest bank joined the conversation, laughing at something she said. She was no longer on the fringes of this world. She was its center of gravity. "I need a drink," Harry muttered, shoving a bewildered Petty aside and heading for the bar. He ordered a neat whiskey and downed it in one fiery gulp. The alcohol did nothing to calm his nerves. It only sharpened the edges of his panic. He had dismissed her. He had looked the woman who shared his bed for a decade in the eye and treated her with condescension. A wonderful piece well done. The memory of his own pompous, patronizing words made his stomach churn. Not only had he not recognized her, he had insulted her on the biggest possible stage in front of everyone who mattered. Meanwhile, Petty's finely tuned social radar was blaring. She had seen the look on Harry's face. This wasn't about a bad business deal or a market fluctuation. This was personal. Her eyes darted to the artist, Trish Angelina. Who was she? The name was vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Petty's world was designed to exclude anyone or anything that didn't who was she directly benefit her. And a mousy first wife, was definitely not on the list. She intercepted one of the younger members of the gala committee, a young woman named Sophie. The artist, Petty said, feigning casual interest. Trish Angelina. What's her story? Sophie's eyes lit up. Oh, she's amazing. A total genius. Came out of nowhere a few years ago. Her gallery, Angelina Studios, is one of the hottest in the country. They say she turned down a commission from a sheikh in Dubai to do this piece for us. Can you believe it? We're so lucky to have her. Sophie leaned in conspiratorially. And between us, Mr. Claudio got her for a steal. Her usual fee for a piece this size is almost double what the committee approved. Petty's painted-on smile felt fragile enough to crack. This woman was not only a smash hit, she was a bargain that Harry had stumbled upon. The idea was infuriating. She thanked Sophie and slunk back to Harry's side at the bar. So the artist is apparently a big deal, she said, trying to sound nonchalant. How strange. I don't recall you ever mentioning her. Harry's knuckles were white as he gripped his empty glass. Her name, I didn't register it. The committee handled it. The committee? Petty's voice was laced with disbelief. Harry, you approve every budget line item. You knew exactly who you were hiring. She stopped, a terrible suspicion dawning. She remembered fragments of conversations from years ago. Harry complaining about his divorce. A name, a quiet, artistic woman. Trish. Her blood ran cold. Oh my God, she whispered, her eyes wide with horror as she looked from Harry's ashen face to the woman across the room. That's her. That's your first wife. The question hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't just that Harry hadn't recognized his ex-wife. It was that the woman he had replaced her with, the woman who had helped him discard her, had been so spectacularly outshone. Petty, in her glittering, expensive gown, suddenly felt cheap. Her beauty was bought and paid for, a curated accessory. Trish's radiance was earned, a light that shone from within, the final humiliation. The fallout began almost immediately, though subtly at first. The story of the brief dismissive encounter began to circulate. It was too delicious to ignore. Harry Claudio, the man who prided himself on knowing everyone and everything, had slighted the headliner of his own party. The first whispers were about his arrogance, but then someone connected the dots. An older board member with a long memory remembered the first Mrs. Claudio, that quiet girl who used to attend these things on Harry's arm. The story mutated, becoming infinitely more scandalous. Not only had he slighted the artist, he had slighted his own ex-wife, the woman he had cast aside, and he hadn't even recognized her. The atmosphere in the room changed. The looks directed at Harry were no longer just admiring. They were speculative, tinged with a delicious dose of Schott and Freud. People looked from Harry and Petty with their tense, frozen smiles to Eleanor, who seemed completely oblivious, calmly discussing her work with a circle of admirers. The contrast was devastating. He was the past, loud and brutish. She was the future, elegant and serene. Harry felt the shift in power like a change in atmospheric pressure. He tried to recover, to work the room, but his arrogance was gone. His jokes fell flat. His handshake felt less like a power move and more like a desperate plea. He saw people whispering behind his back. Ash approached. He had become a caricature, a laughingstock at his own party. For Petty, it was a waking nightmare. Her entire identity was based on being Mrs. Harry Claudio, the glamorous, envied woman who had won. But tonight she was a cosmic loser. She, the auction, saw the pitying glances of the other women, the smug smiles. They all thought the same thing. He left his wife for you, and his wife came back as a queen. Her diamond necklace suddenly felt like a heavy, vulgar chain. The final crushing blow came during the live auction. The last item was a private commission from the artist herself, Trish Angelina. When the auctioneer announced the lot, a wave of excited murmurs ran through the crowd. Bidding was fierce, quickly climbing into six figures. Harry, in a desperate, misguided attempt to regain control to prove something, he wasn't even sure what, entered the bidding. $200,000, his voice boomed a little too loudly. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to him, then to Trish, who was standing near the stage. She registered his bid with a flicker of expression. Was it surprise? Amusement? It was impossible to tell. Her face was a mask of polite neutrality. Another bidder immediately responded. $225, $250, Harry countered, his face flushed. Petty grabbed his arm. Harry, stop, she hissed. What are you doing? He shook her off. This was more than a painting. This was about reclaiming his narrative. He would own a piece of her success. He would force her to deal with him. The price climbed. 300,350. Harry was bidding against a rival tech billionaire, a man he despised. It became a testosterone-fueled war of egos that played out in front of the city's elite. 500,000? Harry yelled, his voice slightly cracking. The room gasped. The auctioneer looked at Trish. She made a small, almost imperceptible head gesture. She then stepped forward and took the microphone. "Thank you all for your incredible generosity." Her calm voice resonated through the silent ballroom. "And thank you, Mr. Claudio, for your enthusiastic bidding." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "However, I must respectfully withdraw this item from the auction." The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. Trish held up a hand for silence. "Angelina Studio has a policy," she continued, her gaze sweeping coolly over the stunned audience before settling for a brief, devastating moment on Harry. "We do not take private commissions solicited through a public spectacle. My art is not a trophy to be won in a bidding war." She smiled, a serene, unbreakable smile. "Instead, I will donate a new original piece directly to the Children's Hospital." "Thank you." She handed the microphone back to the bewildered auctioneer, and with one last elegant nod to the crowd, she turned and walked off the stage. She did not look back at Harry. She didn't have to. The humiliation was absolute. Not only had she rejected his money, she had rejected his entire world, its values, its power games. She had exposed his desperate bid for what it was, a pathetic, vulgar display. In one quiet and unelegant move, she had utterly checkmated him. The fallout was no longer just whispers and gossip. It was a mushroom cloud, and Harry and Petty were at ground zero. What did you think of this unexpected twist? Was this the best way for Trish to show her power? Share your opinion in the comments section. The Empty Shell, the days following the Starlight Gala, were a masterclass in social and professional implosion for Harry and Petty Claudio. The story of the encounter became Thesidy's favorite gossip, retold with increasing embellishment at every charity luncheon and country club dinner. It had all the elements of a perfect scandal. Arrogance, beauty, revenge, and a fall from grace. Harry was no longer just the man who didn't recognize his ex-wife. He was the fool who tried to buy her at a public auction, and was annihilated with delicate but firm precision. The narrative had been taken from him, and he was now merely a character in Eleanor Angelina's epic. His phone, usually an incessant source of validation, went eerily silent. The first concrete sign of the turning tides came 3 days after the gala. Harry wagering to close a major real estate deal, a partnership with a contemporary named Mark Collins. The final call should have been a formality. Instead, Mark was evasive. "The board's pulling back, Harry," Mark said, his voice stripped of its usual camaraderie. "Pulling back, Mark. The numbers are solid. This is a guaranteed win." There was a pause. "It's not about the numbers anymore. It's about optics." The gala was all anyone talked about at the club this weekend. "My partners feel your personal brand is a bit volatile right now." "My personal brand," Harry scoffed. The words tasted like venom. "What does that have to do with a real estate firm?" "It has everything to do with it," Mark said, his tone now sharp and final. "We're out, I'm sorry." The line went dead. Harry stared at his phone, a vein throbbing in his temple. He had been dismissed, weighed, measured, and found wanting. Petty soon after, the board members of his own charitable foundation called an emergency meeting to discuss reputational damage. His power, which he had always believed was forged in his own brilliance, was revealed as a fragile construct held up by the perception of others, and that perception had been shattered. For Petty, the reckoning was more personal and perhaps more cruel. Her world was built on social currency, and her stock had plummeted to zero. She forced herself to attend a luncheon for the ballet, determined to face the whispers. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. She was seated not at the head table, but at a marginal one near the kitchens. The women who had once fawned over her now offered tight, pitying smiles. Then Genevieve Astor, a woman whose social position Petty had always envied and sought to usurp, glided over to her table. "Petty, dear," Genevieve cooed, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I saw the photos from the gala. Such a dramatic night. And your husband's first wife. What a talent." She paused, her smile widening. "Just goes to show you never know who is hidden depths." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. Petty was no longer the winner. She was the consolation prize. A footnote in the incredible story of Trish's rise. Harry, her magnificent penthouse, once a symbol of her success, became a gilded cage. The silence that had once been Trish's torment now belonged to them. They circled each other in the vast, sterile rooms, the air thick with unspoken accusations. One night, Harry slammed a copy of a lifestyle magazine onto the marble kitchen counter. The cover story was a 10-page spread on Eleanor Angelina titled The Art World's Phoenix. It was filled with stunning photos of her work, her gallery, and Eleanor herself looking serene and powerful. "Look at this," he growled, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "They call her a phoenix. What does that make me, the fire?" Petty, who had been nursing a glass of wine, looked up with dead eyes. "It makes you the fool who let a phoenix fly so you could keep a parrot." The insult, so direct and vicious, hung between them. "A parrot?" Harry bellowed. "I gave you everything. You were a glorified event planner before you met me, and you were married to a masterpiece you were too blind to see." She shrieked, her voice cracking. "You didn't just ruin yourself, Harry, you ruined me." Petty blamed Harry for his astounding arrogance. Harry, in the dark and twisted logic of a narcissist, blamed Petty for not being enough, for somehow allowing Trish to eclipse her so completely. A final silent farewell. 2 weeks after the gala, Harry finally broke. Driven by a desperate, toxic cocktail of wounded pride, simmering anger, and a strange, uncharacteristic longing, he did the one thing his lawyers would have screamed at him not to do. Eleanor's gallery. He went to Eleanor's gallery. Angelina Studios was nothing like the stuffy, intimidating galleries of his world. It was a bright, airy space with polished concrete floors and high ceilings, flooded with natural light. The art on the walls was vibrant and alive. And in the back of the gallery, in a glass-walled office, sat Trish. She wasn't painting. She was on a video call with a man on a large screen, and even from a distance, Harry could see the reverence in the man's expression. Eleanor laughed, a full, genuine laugh that echoed faintly in the gallery. Looking relaxed, powerful, and completely in control, she saw him approached through the glass. Her smile didn't waver. She calmly held up a finger, gesturing for him to wait. She finished her point with the man on the screen and said, "Talk soon, Tom." She clicked the screen off. Then she looked at him, her expression placid, as if he were a mildly interesting stranger who had wandered in off the street. "Harry," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a simple statement of fact. Her voice was even, betraying no emotion whatsoever. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He stood awkwardly in the doorway of her office, the power dynamic of their entire marriage reversed. Here he was, the supplicant. She was the one in charge. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he began, his voice. "Do we?" she asked, leaning back in her chair. "I feel like we said everything we needed to say 10 years ago, and then again 5 years ago, and then I suppose again 2 weeks ago at the gala." The casual, cutting precision of her words stung him. "That night I didn't. You recognized me," she finished for him, a small knowing smile touching her lips. "I know. It was quite obvious. In a way, I should thank you. It was the most honest moment our relationship has had in over a decade." The lack of anger in her voice was more unnerving than any diet tribe. He had come prepared for a fight, for tears, for a dramatic confrontation. He was not prepared for this serene, untouchable calm. "I don't understand how this happened," he said, gesturing vaguely at the gallery, at her, at the whole impossible situation. "The woman I knew was quiet. She was simple. She would never have been able to do all this." For the first time, a flash of something, not anger, but a deep-felt sadness crossed Trish's face. "The woman you knew," she said softly, "was a person you never bothered to see. You saw a reflection of what you wanted. A quiet, convenient accessory. You didn't see the artist, the dreamer, the person with her own hopes and passions. You didn't water the plant, Harry. And then you were surprised when it didn't bloom in your shadow." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling street. "You didn't break me, you know. You just erased me. And in doing so, you gave me, I miss you's most incredible gift. You gave me a blank canvas. I got to paint myself back into existence with my own colors in my own way." Harry's desperation mounted. This was not going as he had planned. "I want to fix this," he said. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake." "I miss you?" Trish turned from the window and laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was a sound of genuine, unadulterated disbelief. "Oh, Harry," she said, shaking her head. "No, you don't miss me. You don't even know me. You miss the idea of me. You miss the comfort, the silence, The woman who made your life easy so you could chase your ambitions and your affairs without interruption. And now you miss what I have. You see my success, the admiration of others, and you want to own it. Just like you tried to own my art at the auction, you haven't changed at all. It was at that precise moment that the front door of the gallery opened, and Petty walked in. She looked terrible. Her expensive clothes hung on her like a stranger's, and her face was a mask of tense anxiety. She saw Harry and her face hardened. I knew it. She spat, her voice trembling with rage. I knew you'd come crawling back here. Trish looked from Harry's stunned face to Petty's furious one. She sighed, the sigh of a woman dealing with tedious, predictable drama. This, Eleanor said, gesturing between the two of them, has absolutely nothing to do with me. Not anymore. She walked to her desk, picked up her handbag, and slung it over her shoulder. I have a lunch meeting at the Modern with the Tate curator. He was the one on the call. She let that farewell detail sink in. A final, effortless confirmation of the world she now inhabited. Ben can help you both if you're interested in buying a piece. She paused, looking directly at Petty. Her gaze was not cruel, but piercingly clear. And for what it's worth, he's your problem now. You built your home on stolen ground. You can't be surprised if you have an unstable foundation. She walked past them, out of her office, and towards the front of the gallery. She stopped at the door and looked back at the two of them, standing frozen amidst the beautiful art born of her pain. They looked small and ugly in the bright, clean space. Goodbye, Harry, she said, and the finality in her voice was absolute. It was the closing of a book, the flicking off of a light, the final, silent fall of a curtain. Then she turned and walked out into the sunlight, leaving them behind in the beautiful, echoing gallery, forever trapped in the glow of a woman they had failed to see until it was far, far too late. Outro, they had their money, their penthouse, and their misery. Trish had herself, and finally, truly, she had won. And there you have it. A story of how the deepest betrayals can forge the most incredible strength. Trish's journey was not just a physical transformation. It was about the reclamation of her soul. She shows us that your worth is never determined by another person's inability to see it. Harry and Petty were left with the empty shell of their choices. Gina, while Trish built an empire from the ashes they left behind.